when the publishers of Oz magazine were sent to prison 23 years ago for distributing an allegedly obscene publication. One of them, Felix Dennis, was given the lightest sentence, 9 months, because, said the judge, he was the least intelligent of the defendants. How wrong can you be? Today, Felix Dennis has a fortune of over £150 million, and it's still growing. The Dennis millions have been made from a vast magazine empire which now sells millions of copies a year. The seeds of this success were sown in the heady 1960s, when Britain seemed to throw off its inhibitions to discover sexual freedom. Oz magazine was part of the underground press which sprang up almost overnight at that time. It used explicit cartoons, pictures and words, many of them four-lettered, to appeal to a young readership.
I suppose the way that one could describe it really is a sort of psychedelic private eye at that time. Certainly it had based itself on Private Eye magazine, you know, which was a little more radical and vicious than it is today, where it's virtually a part of the establishment today.
At 21, Felix joined Oz with no previous magazine experience.
And they threw me the checkbook, which I remember was enormously large. I've got no idea why company checkbooks were so big in those days. Very important documents. And a bunch of other things for me to sign, and just said, right, you are now the business manager of Oz magazine, and you better get on with it. But the really key lessons there, although I didn't understand it at the time, was that I was understanding how it is that you run the business of producing magazines.
Oz sometimes invited outsiders to produce their own anarchic editions of the magazine. When they handed over one issue to school children, the result was so earthy that the establishment was outraged.
This issue gave the government of the day the opportunity to finally get down to brass tacks, to put this underground press bunch of people where they belonged, i.e. out of business and in prison.
The school children's Oz led to the longest conspiracy trial in British legal history. Later, the prison sentences passed on the publishers were overturned, but not before Judge Michael Argyle had cast doubt on Felix's intelligence.
I mean, at the time, I was absolutely bloody outraged. If he'd come down to visit me in the cells, I'd have punched him on the nose. Richard Neville had had an extremely, as I understand it, distinguished academic career. He was a co-defendant with me, of course. Jim Anderson, who was the other co-defendant, was himself a lawyer. And here was this young oik who hadn't passed any O-levels, or at most 1 or 2 or whatever it was, and hadn't gone to college, or if he had, he'd not stayed for more than a few weeks. And so, of course, Argyle's immediate reaction was, well, let's see, these are the 2 clever ones, and this is the idiot. He's obviously been led astray by these other ones. He was actually attempting to be kind in his, snotty English Oxbridge way. He was trying to be kind.
The Felix fortune is based on his knack of spotting a trend and exploiting it. For example, why, he wondered, was a group of teenagers queuing outside a Soho sex cinema.
Even I thought this was a bit rich, and I asked some of the kids what the hell they thought they were doing, and they said that they were going to see this movie. And I said, well, what's it about? Because there was nothing outside on the hoarding, there were just the pictures of the naked ladies. And they said, one of the kids said to me, oh, it's great, it's great, it's great. It's this chink, he beats people up, it's really great. So I actually wandered in to see this chink who beats people up. There's a shot in one of his early movies where his head just pans round into the camera and these eyes open up and he just looks straight into the camera, and whatever it is that James Dean had, Bruce Lee had it in spades.
The first serious money to come Felix's way was when he co-authored a biography of Bruce Lee. Then he cashed in further on the Bruce Lee craze by publishing a poster magazine.
We called it Kung Fu Monthly. It was very tongue-in-cheek. I mean, Don Atio was the so-called editor. He was called Don Wonton. I was the publisher, so I was called Felix Yen, and so on.
An even more audacious stroke took him on to his next money-making idea. When the makers of the Star Wars movie failed to copyright their publicity material, Felix unashamedly pinched it.
I immediately set about finding out everything about the film that I could and putting out a huge magazine using all of their publicity shots, and there wasn't a damn thing that they could do about it. That's the only way entrepreneurs can work. I mean, how else does an entrepreneur work? I mean, you don't go along and say, "Excuse me, would you mind making me a millionaire?" "Oh yeah, sure, son. Just join the queue." No, you've got to go and do it. You need a bit of cheek and a bit of more front than Woolworths, I think is the expression.
It's that sort of audacity and instinct that have made him the owner of Dennis Publishing. His fortune of £150 million is based mainly on computer magazines. It's a fortune that provides him with not one, but two Rolls-Royces. He bought the first almost by accident from a rather superior London car dealership.
Just got my first couple of million in the bank. I was dressed fairly casually, it must be stated, and my hair was probably rather longer than it is now. And I asked the guy the classic question, the salesman who came out to greet me, and obviously wasn't very impressed with what he saw. Excuse me, how much is this Rolls Royce? And he gave me the absolute classic answer, which is, well, if you have to ask how much the Rolls Royce is, so you probably can't afford it, and I'm a busy man. And this absolutely enraged me that this person was jerking me around. So I told him in no uncertain terms that what he ought to go and do is get his manager, without even thinking what I was doing. And really, on the basis that this guy had said that I couldn't afford it, I bought it on the spot and literally just wrote out a cheque. And having done so, I realised that A, I couldn't drive, B, I didn't have a driver, and C, I didn't have a garage to put a Rolls Royce in. And that's how I ended up with my first Rolls Royce.
Most weekends, he's driven to his old manor house set in 250 acres in Warwickshire.
I knew I was going to buy this place before I'd even walked into the door. The garden is the glory of this house. One has few neighbours, and such neighbours as there were, eventually their houses came up for sale and I could buy those and just begin to sort of incorporate a very small and modest estate so that my friends can come and stay here all the time and so on. I don't know, I can't explain to you why I love this house, I just love it. That's the end of it. I expect to end up turning up my toes in the bedroom upstairs. Most of the port and the sherries and all that are all over here, and the really good stuff, the most important wines, resting quietly for another 10 or 15 years.
In what was the coal cellar, Felix now keeps his valuable wine collection.
This is a case of Petrus. The story behind this is that a friend of mine that I sold the rights, the Australian rights, to Personal Computer World, he sold his company, got a lot of money for it. And I helped him slightly during the negotiations. He was saying to me, "Felix, I really owe you a drink. I've got to be honest here. I've done very well out of this." And I said, "I think you owe me a bit more than a drink, Sean. You owe me at least a case." And very foolishly, he he said to me, I owe you a case of any wine in the world. So I got a case of Chateau Petrus 1982 out of him, which I think sent him back many thousands of pounds. But I promised not to open it until he comes to his next visit here in England, and we'll try a bottle then.
How many thousands of pounds do you think for those?
Many thousands of pounds. I think
£19,000 actually.
Find it. It's not exactly thick on the ground, Petrus.
When he's in London, Felix still lives at the same flat that he had at the time of the Oz trial. The same, that is, except for an extremely costly facelift.
There's always a part of me that is wedded to Soho. If you're going to live in the country, then it's lovely to live right in the middle of the country, and if you're going to live in the town, then you might as well live right in the middle.
In his youth, Felix virtually abandoned his formal education. He's anxious that his many godchildren shouldn't do the same thing.
I show them all the books. If I think it's necessary, I even start making them count all the books. And then I tell them that I've read all the books that you've just counted. And there are 5 other libraries of mine around the world with just as many books in. And I've read them all. And I'm still catching up. Usually the library lecture terrifies them into staying on at school. Sometimes when I walk up the stairs to reach my Soho, lovely old Soho rambling flat, you know, sometimes I think, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to go on doing this. I can't imagine myself in a Zimmer frame living in Soho.
But for the moment, Soho remains the heart of the Dennis businesses. 200 people depend on Felix for their livelihoods, including some he's known since school days.
I always had this feeling that he saw himself a bit as a Victorian father. He was a sort of head of the household. He was the person who sat on top and no one really got terribly close to. But he was benign. He was all powerful. But he was there. He was there to help. He was there to run things. And I think that in a way he still sees himself like that today. I don't think he likes people getting that close to him. That's just the way he is. And funny sort of way, that's what makes him the person he is and the person that we stick with.
Good news on, for example, we didn't speak about home entertainments. I ran the company for about 10 years, and I did an okay job. I wouldn't rate myself any higher than just an okay manager. I forced myself to do it. Forced myself to get up early. Forced myself to go in there. Forced myself to work very late and long hours. So you've already didn't delegate sufficiently, and all the other cardinal sins that owners. The people who found companies are usually guilty of. I think the only thing that I did right in the end, apart from founding the company, was that I realised that I wasn't a great manager. Just because one's good at starting something or is indifferent to risk doesn't mean that you're the sort of person that can actually manage all that well.
Felix is a very strange kind of competitor because if something's going wrong in the market, like an ad agency is going bust, or a distributor is about to welsh on the terms you've agreed with him, he actually rings you up and tells you about this. He tells you, look, you've got £100,000 exposure with this agency and they're about to go bust, get them to pay you quickly. And I've actually never met any competitor in publishing who behaves in that way before. It's a very kind of refreshing way to do business.
So in a way the March issue would be a lot better timing than the February one anyway.
We will only produce high-quality magazines. You know, we will not produce rubbish. We won't take the easy option. We won't publish porn magazines. We won't put out crap. We just will not do it. Life's too short to be bothered with this. This means that to produce really high-quality magazines, we really do have to train people, and we really do have to promote people quickly. We really do have to spot talent. We have to reward talent. We run the company ruthlessly like a meritocracy.
unattended baggage should be left untouched.
10 years ago, Felix set up an American end to his operation. His shares in that company alone are now worth £54 million. Almost every month, he travels to see his US partners. He has a fear of flying, so for privacy and comfort, he books 2 seats on a plane which will get him there fast.
Took off today at 10:30 or whatever it was, and we arrived here at 9:40 or 10 o'clock, whatever it was, before we actually left London. So I'm now going to have a full day's work, whereas if I left at the same time on a 747, I'd have blown that day completely. I mean, it would virtually have that day's work would have escaped me. So I think because Concorde is so quick and makes sure that I come here more often, and because it does give you an extra day's work, it's played a pretty important part in keeping me coming to the USA. And here you actually get the feeling when people are going to work that they're going there to get it. They're going there to make it. They're going to, today's the day. There's always a sort of feeling of expectation and excitement, and something's going to happen. And you just don't get that kind of feeling at all in London. And there's no question that people here would do work harder. There's absolutely no question at all. And the rewards are consequently greater.
The rewards in Felix's case have been more than enough to provide him with a third home, a Manhattan apartment. And then there's the other little place on Lake Candlewood, Connecticut.
It's just a shack in the woods, really. I mean, quite literally, that's all it is. I decided to do the house out loosely in Navajo style. I'd come up here on a Friday night and probably not get away until Tuesday morning. What with telephones and computers and faxes here, I can do whatever work I need to do. So I managed to spend 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 nights, say, out of every week before I go back to New York City. Of course, I try and lengthen it out as much as possible, but in the end, you've got to go back to the office and get back to work. I often don't want to.
Felix has never married. He has a number of occasional girlfriends. Susan Murakoshi seems to be the nearest he has to a permanent relationship.
There was a romantic attachment for a long time on my part, and that was pretty hard to detach myself from. But over the years, he made it very clear as to the limitations.
If I have one redeeming feature, it's that I've never been anything other than utterly honest with the women that I see, in that I point out to them that if there's even a shadow of a thought that they might end up as Mrs. Dennis, then they'd be better off wasting their time somewhere else.
We're basically friends first. I would say that that was primary. And it's just nice when he's around, and when he's not, then I have my own career. I'm a writer and an actor and a dancer. And so I just keep myself occupied, which isn't too hard in New York.
I do not seek to rule women's lives. I do not seek to control them. I do not seek to have them as my property. I do not seek for them to be an equal partner in my life. I want them as my friends, and I want them as lovers, but I am not jealous by nature. In any case, hey, it's a lot more fun to be single, man. I mean, let's get real. I mean, if you had millions of pounds and you could be in love with half a dozen beautiful women at the same time, and they were very happy with that arrangement, or would you like to be married and have children? Choose.
Would you mind if I ask you this? You haven't set your face against marriage because your father walked out when you were 2?
Yes, I think there's an element of that. I think I've come to terms and understand why my father left my mother. I think there's a lot of my father in me, and I don't think I'd want to do that to anybody, to any woman. I wouldn't want to do that. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it. If I was married to somebody and I woke up and found that I'd been on some gigantic binge, and woken up and I was married, and 5 days or a week after I'd been in the same house with the same person, even if it meant that I lost everything, I'd walk out the door. I'd just walk and I'd start walking, and I don't know where I'd walk to.
Felix has made his choice, to be married to the business. If it all turned to dust tomorrow for some...
It will all turn to dust. All of it turns to dust in the end.
Could you start again, or did just the right things happen to you at the right time?
Now we're getting down to the only bit of real interest, apart from the fact that... when I die, my friend, it doesn't matter what I do, even if I become Prime Minister of this country, which I have absolutely no intention of doing, I promise you. It's all right, John, you can relax. I know what it'll say in the Grawny ad. I beg your pardon. I know it'll say in the Times. I know it'll say in Telegraph. It'll be one of the small ones, down the bottom right-hand corner, and it'll say, Oz editor dies. That's what it'll say. And there's nothing I can do to change that. I don't seek to change it. So now you've got down to the other only interesting bit. How did a git like this, to use John Lennon's wonderful, how did a git like this get from here to there? I mean, how much of it was luck and how much of it is some innate talent that I, the reader or viewer, do not possess? Is this where we are, really? Okay. I was born jammy. I was born lucky. Here's a little bit of doggerel from America, which goes, if you want to be rich, you son of a bitch, I'll tell you what to do. Never sit down with a tear or a frown and paddle your own canoe. Janis Joplin said it better. Oh, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all drive Porsches and I must make amends. I worked hard all my lifetime with no help from my friends. Oh, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? Or maybe a Rolls-Royce. That's the meaning of life.